Today, I'd like to take you on a journey through British architecture and design through the centuries. As part of my design education, I spent a year studying architectural and design history, beginning with 17th century French and British architecture and progressing right through to the present day. While French design has undoubtedly influenced architecture across Europe, today I'd like to focus exclusively on Britain and explore how architecture, interiors, furniture, and decorative arts evolved over the centuries. We'll look at the major design movements, the reigning monarchs of the time, the architects who shaped our built environment, and how each period reflected the social, political, and economic landscape of Britain. Because architecture doesn't happen in isolation. Buildings are often physical records of history itself. The Stuart period, 1603 to 1714. Let's begin in the 17th century. This was the era of the Stuart monarchs, including King James I, Charles I, Charles II, and later Queen Anne. Britain was emerging from medieval traditions and looking increasingly toward Europe for inspiration. One of the most significant figures of this period was Inigo Jones. Often regarded as the father of classical architecture in Britain, Jones introduced the principles of Renaissance architecture that he had studied in Italy. For the first time, British buildings began embracing symmetry, proportion, columns, pediments, and mathematical order. The most famous example is the Queen's House in Greenwich. Following the Great Fire of London in 1666, another giant emerged, Sir Christopher Wren. Wren designed more than 50 churches throughout London, including the magnificent St Paul's Cathedral. The interiors of this period remained relatively restrained compared with France, but decorative plasterwork, oak panelling, and classical detailing became increasingly common. The Georgian era, 1714 to 1837. The Georgian period spans the reigns of Kings George I through George IV and later William IV. For many designers and architects, this represents one of Britain's greatest architectural periods. Georgian design embraced balance, elegance, and proportion. Cities were carefully planned, terraces were perfectly aligned, and architecture became increasingly sophisticated. One of the leading architects was Robert Adam. Adam transformed British interiors by introducing lighter colours, classical motifs, decorative plaster ceilings, and refined proportions. The Georgian period also produced the iconic British townhouse. Think of places such as Royal Crescent, the Circus, Bedford Square. Furniture became more refined through craftsmen such as Thomas Chippendale, George Hepplewhite, Thomas Sheraton. Their influence remains visible in furniture design today. The Regency period, 1811 to 1820. Although relatively short, the Regency period deserves its own mention. The Prince Regent, who later became King George IV, favoured elegance, luxury, and sophistication. No architect represents Regency Britain better than John Nash. Nash designed Regent Street, Regent's Park, Royal Pavilion. The Royal Pavilion is particularly fascinating because it combines Indian, Chinese, and Islamic influences into something completely unique. Regency interiors became brighter, lighter, and more decorative than their Georgian predecessors. The Victorian era, 1837 to 1901. Under the reign of Queen Victoria, Britain experienced the Industrial Revolution. This changed everything. New manufacturing methods allowed furniture, textiles, wallpapers, and decorative items to be mass-produced. Victorian design embraced richness, ornamentation, and abundance. Interiors became darker, heavier, and more elaborate. Patterned wallpapers, decorative mouldings, velvet fabrics, stained glass, and carved timber became common. One of the most influential figures was Augustus Pugin. Pugin was a leading advocate of Gothic revival architecture and played a major role in the design of the Palace of Westminster. Another important movement emerged towards the end of the Victorian era, the arts and crafts movement. Led by William Morris, it pushed back against industrialisation and championed craftsmanship, honesty of materials, and handmade quality. Many designers today still draw inspiration from Morris's principles.